just had an ER patient request a different nurse because he didn't want a nurse covered in tattoos with piercings. Homeboy, you have better luck finding a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow than you do finding an ER nurse without massive amounts of trauma that turns into tattoos and piercings. We don't exist. We're all covered in tattoos and piercings to hide our trauma.
Guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to read a very entertaining email sent from a subscriber. This is my guy. He's written in before. He's written in about adventures in his line of work, because in his line of work, he is right there in the front lines dealing with a subject we talk about quite often, nurses. You see, our guy here is a traveling nurse, and he's married to a woman who's also a nurse. But from all accounts, it seems that she's actually one of the rare good ones, and they travel the country, work for a while, then move on, and have a pretty interesting life. Well, this story, again, is to share the tale of a gal that they worked with who was a nurse, and let me tell you, it ain't too good. It only reinforces a lot of the, well, it seems to be a very common stereotype about the types. And what's that stereotype that I'm sure some of you may be asking if you're new to the channel? Well, of the different careers out there where it's kind of advisable not to get involved with gals that had that line of work, nurses is right up there. They typically tend to be, at least in terms of the countless stories shown, to be cheaters, typically hooking up at the hospital or affairs behind the scenes with other hospital workers, doctors, EMTs, all that type of thing. And there's just so many stories, it's unreal. And there's all sorts of other characteristics sometimes you can see, like that little video in the beginning I covered there. And, it's crazy. But again, it happens so often, I'd like to cover this. Because again, this is a men's channel, and we're here to have a good laugh, but also to help each other out. And there's other careers as well that's right up there with the negative stereotype, and you know them. But anyhow, guys, I'm going to jump into this about this particular gal he worked with, and holy crap, you're going to get your money's worth. So it starts off, says here, hey SSM. It's been a while since I wrote to you. Just to give you a fast recap, me and the wife are both traveling nurses. I've written to you in the past about nurses and their questionable life decisions. I'm still traveling the country, working at many hospitals, and I swear just about every hospital I've worked at, there is a Jessica. Well, there's always a Jessica Jezebel. There's Jessica Jezebels over at Petco, but especially many of them in the hospitals. I don't know if this story would make the cut, but I thought I would send it in to see what you thought. Dude, you had to know, given how this goes, that this would make the cut. I took a new traveling assignment in the fall of 2022 in the COVID ICU. This is when COVID had a resurgence. Me and the wife always take assignments in the same unit, and we are used to working together. Sometimes her patient assignment is close to mine, and other times she's on the other side of the unit, important for later. The fact that you and your wife can actually work together and you're not at each other's throats, that says a lot. And if you got a great marriage, that's awesome, because so many marriages suck. We need to have more of that. So we got to work taking care of our patients. It doesn't take long to make new friends and learn who's who. The unit is set up so there is a pod with 2 computers between every 2 rooms, and there are usually 2 nurses at each pod. After working there a few weeks, I met a nurse named Jessica. No, that's not her real name. He says, he actually tells me her real name, and I'm not going to do that. But he says the BIT can die in hell. But for the story, we can call her Jessica. I've noticed her in passing, but this is the first time we actually shared a pod together. At the start of the shift, I do the normal instructions, introductions. So I completed my task, and I went down to sit at the pod so I could do some of the charting. I said, hey, what's going on? And she was looking at her cell phone and said, I'm looking at my list. So I thought she was going to the store after work and asked where she could recommend a good grocery store to do shopping. This is the first time I really had any conversation with her. In the first 15 minutes, she explained it's not a grocery list, it's a body list. Right there, while she's on the job, between patients, when she should probably seeing patients, attending to patients, she's on her phone looking at her body list. In other words, her list of dudes. Or maybe chicks too, I don't know. She was only in the 60s and was trying to get over 100. Sodom and Gomorrah 2.0. Well, if she's young and attractive, why doesn't she have 100? Well, we're going to find out in a moment why she doesn't have 100. She went further and explained that she had chlamydia 3 different times. This happened by getting it from one of her hookups. She passed the STD to her toy. She cured herself. The toy then gave it back to her. She cured herself again, and the toy gave it back to her again. She realized the toy kept giving it to her, and she threw the toy away. She's actually telling this dude this stuff. They're on the freaking job, and she's an open book about all this. If the situation was reversed, and a guy was telling something comparable to this to a female employee, you know what would happen to that guy, and rightfully so. I was extremely uncomfortable. I just had asked about a grocery list in a grocery store, and in 15 minutes it was the story of how her toy kept giving her the gift that kept on giving, and her list of every man she hooked up with. In that 15 minutes, she even talked about how she liked recording her hookups. I excused myself and tried to look busy for the rest of the shift. I did not return to the pod. This is when, number one, you inform your wife about her and things like that. Because otherwise, well, we know this isn't going to go anywhere good. And your wife doesn't want to make friends with someone like this. And also, I might add, this would be a good time to maybe consider HR. But then again, will HR treat a guy making a complaint the same way a woman? Well, I made good friends with some of the other male nurses there. So I asked a buddy there if he had met Jessica. He responds with, "Oh, you mean the chick that got chlamydia 3 times?" Apparently she told him and tried to be able to write his name down the list. And he flat out denied her. Well, no kidding. Who wants to be with the gal that freaking who's admitting she got chlamydia 3 times, amongst many other things? I didn't see this, but I believe him 100%. To explain why every man shot her down is because she was around 5'4", and I would guess that she weighs between 250 to 300 pounds and was 26 years old. 5'4", close to 300 pounds? Gee, I wonder why it's difficult for her to get to 100. I'm impressed she got 60. But then again, you'd be amazed at what some guys will put their you-know-what into, as long as nobody knows about it. And there's some guys that like very large women. To give her credit, her boobs were huge, like probably need specially made bras to hold them back. I don't care how big her boobs, I don't care if they're fucking Y cups. If she's the size of a freaking water buffalo, no thank you. As time went on, when me and my wife did not work close together, Jessica would make efforts to talk to me. She would do the classic line and say that, "Can you please help my patient?" She would always try and scrape her shoulders against me and get a little touchy with me in the patient rooms. I would do the task and leave as fast as I could. Well, given how big she is, I don't know how she doesn't bump into anybody, but obviously she's doing it on purpose to turn you on. You better tell your wife about this. This ain't going to end well. A few days after that, a patient was coding. I was pushing meds through a central line in the fem. To simplify this, it's like an IV in the femoral vein. Jessica was getting into position to do compressions. When she passed me, she grabbed my waist and scraped her huge infected boobs across my back. Hello, harassment here on multiple fronts here. Again, if a guy was walking past a gal and was rubbing his package against her, you don't think she would complain? I mean, as long as she was turned up. If she liked the guy, it'd be different. Now, I've been polite and professional up until this point by turning down her advances, but I was getting extremely uncomfortable and I was thinking about making a complaint to management about her. You have every right to. But the thing is that going to be as effective if a guy does it? Well, I decided to hold off for now. I asked her to stop and that I'm not interested in open marriage with my wife. She responded, "You don't want to be my daddy?" I will do things your wife will never do. I can imagine that. I demanded she stop calling me daddy and that she was going to start causing an issue in my marriage. Tell your wife, dude, or you're going to get the hellfire. It was like a game to her. she started texting my wife and pretending to be her friend. Now, I have not told my wife nor really anybody else as of yet. Smack! It's going to come back to get you. Because what happens when Jessica decides, okay, this guy's rejecting me, now I'm going to make up a bunch of shit. And it gets back to your wife and impacts your job. Now, I'm going to guess your wife will probably, hopefully believe that, one, you wouldn't cheat on her, and you wouldn't touch Jessica with a cattle prod, even though a cattle prod is kind of appropriate for her. But still, you don't need this crap. If a dude was doing this to your wife, wouldn't you want to know? Mostly because I'm a guy and was afraid that they would not believe me or take me seriously. However, the next week, she really crossed the line. Your wife would believe you. Me and my wife don't always work the same days. Jessica is friends with my wife and knows her schedule. We always wake up at 5 p.m. 5 p.m.? Maybe you wrote that wrong, unless you just always do the night shift. On this day, my wife is working and I'm not. When I check my phone, Jessica texts me saying, "Hey daddy, I just got waxed. Want to come over at 7 p.m. Man, she's relentless. With her dress and a picture of her in a thong that looked like it was taken in the bathroom at work. Okay, Jabba the Hutt in a thong. I was livid and asked how she got my number. She told me not to worry about it. I asked my wife if she gave Jessica my phone. She said, no, why? I said, you're going to want to see this, and handed her my phone. Here we go. My wife was speechless at first and then said, that bitch. I knew she was an SLUT and she's going after you. My wife was also pissed about me. Mad because I didn't tell her and didn't make a complaint to her about HR. What'd I tell you? Come on, bro. You had, okay. I don't know if you were watching me in 2022 and maybe now you'd know you better tell your wife this stuff. It's going to come out sooner or later. I'd explain it was because I was a guy and it would be harder to believe. However, if we go to HR together, we'd have a much more convincing case. Also, since she has now texted me thong pictures that are taken at work, she could not turn it in against me. Okay. It seems to me that Jessica should be canned. Let's see. So we both march our way to HR together. Before I could say a word, my wife went on a 10-minute rant and showed him the photos and texts. The HR guy rolled his eyes and muttered, I am losing count of all the complaints I get about her, and I think I might have seen this photo from another complaint. Hello, why isn't Jessica fired? Well, we all know why. Unless, actually, she was doing the HR guy. You can't rule that out. My wife exploded again, yelling, you knew she took those pictures at work and sent them to other men, and she still works here? If this was a guy doing this to a female nurse, he'd be fired on the spot, so why not her? Good question, wife. He looked shocked that he was being called out for not firing her. He recomposed himself and said, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will take care of it. I bet he was getting BJs from her. I bet you, I don't know, I could be wrong here. Complaints went to him. He obviously confronted her, and instead she had a little transaction or two with him, and there you go. So, did Jessica get fired? Okay, drum roll here. No, of course not. She got moved to another department. In the same freaking hospital? Did she learn her lesson and was going to settle down? No, of course not. However, she only lasted a month. So it came out that she went to work with her toy with vibrating features that you would insert inside the hoo-ha. She told another nurse about this, and she was challenging herself to grip the toy for the entire 12-hour shift, not allowing it to slip out. Finally, after that complaint, she was terminated. Well, I'm glad she finally was canned. Maybe there was another HR person involved. I don't know, and I highly question that HR guy that this whole thing went down with initially. But there you go, guys. Now, does this mean that every single nurse is going to behave like this? No. Does this mean that every single nurse is crazy? No. Make that clear. But a heck of a lot are, and that's why I cover these things, because they are pretty funny. And a lot of guys have gotten involved with and married them and learned the hard way. So at the very least, you guys that do dating relationships, you guys that are out on the market, just be careful. Nothing more. Scrutiny is necessary, especially nowadays, but it is extremely necessary for individuals, gals that certainly have a certain line of work. And this Jessica here is no different. Jessica the Hutt is no different. Jabba the Hutt's daughter there. So anyhow, bro, good story. I appreciate you sending it in. And definitely send more about your adventures nursing across the country. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And guys, you got a good story you want to share, or you got a question you want to ask me, send it my way, strongsuccessfulmale@gmail.com. And if it's a good one, I'll definitely cover it. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.